It's tough to be social when you don't drink because you don't want me around. You know, like some nights it's fine, but many nights I get this feeling back from the group like we all got together and we realized you're going to remember most of this. So we'd like for you to go home. Now, what you don't think about is it goes both ways. Your drinking affects my life. Nobody ever thinks about that, but it's true because I'm a good listener, you know? And so I listen, and I listen, and I listen. I'm fine with that, really. I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is the next day when I end up alone in a park waiting for a picnic. There is no picnic. It's just, I'm just alone on a blanket with baby carrots and cheese cubes, waiting for someone with a 5-digit phone number to try and call. Now, you don't get that kind of detail in a joke unless you've actually lived it.
Good morning. It's Thursday, Jordan Peterson Thursday, March the 26th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have Varney and Company, motivation, meditation, and Jordan Peterson. All that and more when I get back. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. Now, Stuart Varney.
By the way, good morning, everyone. Look, we have a nervous markets, plural, all over the world. And once again, the price of oil is the problem. 94.37 right now. That's up 4.5% and climbing. President Trump threatens to unleash hell if there's no deal with Iran by the Friday deadline. He's told aides he wants a speedy end to the war. He doesn't want a protracted war. Well, this morning, the Israelis reported they had killed the Revolutionary Guard's naval commander. He's the man who ordered the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz. With oil up, stocks are down. Look at this. Plenty of red ink. The Dow off 340, NASDAQ down 240. The S&P is down 52. Bitcoin below 70,000 bucks a coin, 69.3 at the moment. Interest rates, they're staying at elevated levels. The 10-year is at 437. The 2-year yield's 393. 393. Look, there's other news. No relief at the airports. The TSA call-out rate is rising. Long lines reported at George Bush Airport in Texas. There will be no vote in the Senate on paying TSA agents until tomorrow. The president's frustrated. He says he will send in the National Guard to help if things don't change. The stock price of both Google and Meta moving a little lower after a court in Los Angeles ruled against them in the social media addiction trial. Look out for an avalanche of lawsuits. 3,000 already lodged in California, more elsewhere. This could be like the tobacco takedown 30 years ago. However, the LA decision will be appealed. New Fox polls show a majority opposes the military action in Iran. The polls also show that Trump has a slightly better approval rating than Obama at the same point in his second term. You're going to meet baseball great Keith Hernandez. He's going to figure out how the new baseball rules that were on display in the opening games Wednesday. And did you know he still receives royalties from his appearances on Seinfeld 30 years ago? He gets about $5,000 a year. Thursday, March 26, 2026.
And that was Stuart Varney. Nonprofit news now. Back in a minute. Thank you. At its core, this kind of behavior shows a lack of compassion and an inversion of values. Where empathy would normally compel us to feel for someone else, to understand and share in their pain, these Democrats feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. They see conservatives' failures as a kind of currency, as confirmation that the world is just because they're not the only ones struggling. They see conservative suffering not as something to alleviate, but as a balancing act that brings conservatives down to their perceived level. This attitude often stems from deep insecurity. When a bad Democrat feels chronically inadequate or resentful of conservative success, it becomes psychologically easier to root for their downfall than to improve their own situation. It's a shortcut to self-esteem. If conservatives lose, then the bad Democrat doesn't feel so far behind. Rather than aspire upward, they pull conservatives downward. It's not about winning, it's about making sure conservatives don't win either. That kind of mindset corrodes everything around it. It corrodes trust, ambition, and any genuine sense of community or mutual support. You'll often see this expressed in subtle, cutting remarks. Maybe it's a joke about someone's bad luck that's just a bit too sharp, a bit too rehearsed. Or it's a casual comment dropped in the middle of a conversation, something that seems harmless at first but reveals a deep-seated joy in someone else's pain. These are the bad Democrats who never fail to mention that someone had it coming or say things like, "I always knew they weren't that great anyway," the moment someone they secretly envied stumbles. That's a quiet kind of cruelty, but it's unmistakable once you learn to recognize it. This delight in misfortune doesn't stop at passive observation either. Sometimes it crosses the line into sabotage. If a person truly enjoys watching others fall, what's to stop them from giving the situation a little nudge, spreading a rumor, withholding help, amplifying someone's mistake? These become tools in their arsenal because if they can't feel good about themselves through honest effort, then at least they can feel better by ensuring someone else feels worse. And all of this is rationalized under a cloak of self-justification. They deserve it. It's just how the world works. It's important to note that this tendency is not only destructive to others, but also to the Democrat who harbors it. Over time, this way of thinking calcifies into a worldview. They become unable to feel joy unless it's contrasted with someone else's misery. Their identity becomes so entangled with envy and resentment that genuine connection becomes impossible. The bad Democrat begins to see relationships as competitions, life as zero-sum games, and others' happiness as a personal threat. So they isolate themselves, not through physical distance, but through emotional toxicity. The bad Democrat becomes incapable of celebrating others' victories, incapable of offering support, incapable of love without condition or agenda. Manipulation is a central tool in the behavioral toolkit of a bad Democrat, and among the most common methods they employ are guilt, fear, and charm. These are not simply reactions or emotional states, they are deliberate instruments of control. The manipulator studies others carefully, often subconsciously, learning how to push buttons, twist words, and frame situations in a way that gets them what they want. But they don't rely on honesty for transparency. Instead, they operate like emotional tacticians, constantly scanning for the most efficient path to dominance or self-preservation. This kind of manipulation is not incidental. It is often patterned, persistent, and calculated. Guilt is one of their primary weapons. They use it to make others feel responsible for their well-being, their mistakes, or even their happiness. You might hear things like, "After everything I've done for you," or "You're really going to leave me like this?" These statements are not expressions of vulnerability, they're traps. The goal is to make the other person feel obligated, indebted, and eventually submissive. The bad Democrats want you to believe that your boundaries are cruelty, that your autonomy is selfishness, and that your desire for fairness is a betrayal. This emotional twisting creates a psychological prison where the manipulated party questions their own sense of right and wrong. Fear is another potent tool in their arsenal. It may not always be overt. It doesn't have to come in the form of threats or yelling. Sometimes it's insidious, like a cold silence after you say something they dislike, a subtle implication that they could make your life difficult if you cross them, or the creation of an environment where unpredictability keeps you constantly on edge. The goal is to keep others anxious, unsteady, and eager to avoid confrontation. Now, if you're walking on eggshells, then you're easier to steer. Fear becomes a behavioral leash that shortens with every emotional outburst. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Dr. Berg.
We're going to talk about how to 10x the results of using castor oil, not just on your face, but in many other applications. It's been around for at least 4,000 years. It was found in some of these ancient Egyptian tombs and has been used in Chinese medicine, Indian medicine for thousands of years. Yet, in an unaltered state, it's actually a pretty deadly poison. In the process of making the oil, certain things are taken out to make it one of the most healing things that you can put on your body. Let's first talk about the type of castor oil that you get. If you're just getting some commercial castor oil that's not organic, it's not cold pressed, then you may be getting a chemical in there called hexane, which is in petroleum. You want it hexane free, cold pressed, organic in a darker bottle, because you don't want something that's rancid or too refined as an oil to put on your skin. It's one of the thickest oils, but it has something in it that is so rare, it's not in any other plants. It's a certain natural chemical called ricinoleic acid, which has the ability to get rid of a spot on your face. It gets rid of wrinkles. It is super hydrating. Castor oil has the ability to penetrate all 3 layers of your skin, and in some cases even dissolve certain types of lumps on your body. Probably one of the biggest mistakes that people make, they're not using it consistently enough. They try it once and they expect these miracles to happen. Be consistent, use it longer. You have to do this 3 times a week for at least 30 days to 6 weeks in some cases to start seeing change. You want to use just a little bit and really rub it into the different parts of your face. And you're going to find that it actually helps to hydrate your face. One of the biggest benefits of using castor oil on your eyelashes or even eyebrows, it tends to increase the growth and the thickening of your eyelashes and even your eyebrows. Works on skin tags, warts. For those things, I would also add iodine and garlic. Iodine helps to reduce estrogen. Some people even use it on the eye itself for dry eyes. Another thing that castor oil can do, which is pretty significant, is increase the strength of your immune system. Within 2 hours, let's say you have tartar. Castor oil has the ability to help dissolve tartar. Let's say you have a problem with a liver issue, or maybe even like a really bad arthritis somewhere in your body. This is why they use castor oil packs to put it on different areas of your body, even putting it on the liver to help liver congestion and increase bile flow. You can buy them on Amazon or online, which are certain types of cloth or cotton that you soak in castor oil, and then you apply it over your body like a bandage over a period of time. Because castor oil penetrates through the skin deeply, you can use these packs over your ovaries if you have a cyst, for example, or even on the breast. You want to make sure you take sea kelp because of the iodine. Iodine helps to reduce estrogen. And usually fibrocystic breast problems come from too much estrogen. You can actually add something called DMSO. It goes right into the skin. It's a highly penetrating substance. But also magnesium oil is very important to add if you have any type of arthritis in your lower back, or maybe you can rub it into the knees or even your feet, or even arthritis on your hands. Even the muscles on your shoulders, the traps. So that way, when you go to sleep at night, you're very, very relaxed and you're ready to go right into the deep sleep. Another little hack I would recommend for your skin, if you really want to take your skin to the next level. Dip your face in an ice bath, then you add the castor oil. The combination is going to create a really amazing effect with your skin. We could also add a couple more things to this. You can start going on a fast, like a 48-hour fast or even a 72-hour fast, where your body's going to start cleaning up all the dead stuff and the dead cells and replace it with new cells. Adding that additional step would just take your skin to the next level. It's kind of a multi-layer effect of all these great things for your skin. And of course, this also is dependent on what you eat. Another really important application is on any scars, stretch marks, or even scars from injury. You can use those and rub it into the skin and see huge benefits from that. Castor oil also activates hair growth, so you can rub it into your scalp and to help your hair grow. And it's also good for dandruff and dry scalp because of the antimicrobial effect. If you're going to use it for the scalp to help with your hair, I would highly recommend you use the Jamaican black castor oil. Also, let's say you have a lot of inflammation in your body, and castor oil is a very potent anti-inflammatory, and you want to create a systemic effect through the entire body. You can rub it into your feet. It gets absorbed into the feet, and it gets absorbed into the blood throughout the entire body. Of course, if you have arthritis on your knees or your fingers, you can rub it into the hands or your knees, or even your lower back if you have pain in the low back. And this last one is important. If you're pregnant, realize that when you take castor oil, it can create early contractions. So you don't want to be doing that unless it's time for delivery. And then on that note, if you haven't seen my part 1 castor oil video, I'm going to put that up right here. Check it out.
And that was Dr. Berg. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, motivation.
Life's going to happen to you when you have a dream. You're going to get slapped around. When you get going, when you get rolling, get ready for the criticism. Get ready for the opposition. Get ready for people to try and block you and conspire against you.
Don't be surprised at the struggle. Don't be surprised you got punched in the face. Don't be surprised you're in round 4 and your legs are giving out. Don't be surprised about the inevitable.
You want to give up, you want to fall down, you want to turn around and run with everybody else, you're going to question yourself. You're going to say, is this really making much sense? That's all going to happen to you. Before things get better for you, they're going to get real bad. You're going to fail your way to success. When you have a dream, think it not strange that you'll face the fiery furnaces of this world. You will have tribulations.
You don't find peace first. I found peace on the opposite end of trials, tribulations, suffering. It's miserable. It's hard.
The storm you are facing will not destroy you. It will refine you. The clouds clear, they go away, the darkness eventually dissipates, and you're going to end up standing much bolder, much more steadfast, much stronger. a whole lot more confident when this thing blows over. Just hold on. Tie the knot. Hold on for one more day. There will be something beautiful out of this mess. Out of your pain. Out of your struggle. Out of your tribulations. Your trial is a trial. Life is trying you.
It tests you. Let's see how much of this you can take before you say, let's just be finished with this. Because sometimes we don't understand, like, what is this thing? What is my purpose? Why am I here? Why do I have to go through this pain? Why do I have to go through this fear all the time? Why can't it just be peaceful all the time? Then there wouldn't be life.
No matter what you've ever been through, you had to go through it to get right here.
You're stronger than you think. This is going to rebuild you. There is a purpose to your pain. Look for it. And right now, in a thought, you can change your life. In one decision, you can change your life. Your decisions shape your destiny. You can make a whole new decision right now to see a different life, to focus on a different life, to make different decisions, to change that filter. You can make a decision today to change your mindset, to work on you, to rise from the ashes of where you are. You can make a decision that you're blessed, that you're favored, that there's a purpose to your pain. Or you can just let the world come at you some more. You can be a victim. You can just always react all the rest of your life rather than step up and start dictating the terms.
It is a daily decision that you have to make. Which me will I be? Which you will you do? You're not done choosing. It's not a one-time event.
Wherever you are right now, you have the ability to make a decision to take your life in another direction. You can make the decision to stop, to quit, to become a complainer or a victim, or you can decide that you're going to be victorious. We make decisions, and our decisions make us. You can decide to dedicate yourself to do the things today others won't do in order to have the things tomorrow others won't have. You're not a victim. Stop talking victim talk. Stop talking about I can't, I quit. It's not probable. I don't think I can make it happen. It's impossible. Stop talking like that. Stop cursing and start believing. Don't nobody got to believe in you. Ain't nobody got to talk about you. When you in the dark, working every single day, you reap what you sow. And at some point, you're going to be great.
And that was motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, meditation. And that was a little meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Jordan Peterson.
You didn't ghost anyone. You didn't cause drama. You didn't even say goodbye. One day you were fully present, giving, listening, holding space for everyone. And then you just vanished. No explanation, no warning. You simply stopped showing up. And the scariest part, it felt like survival. Here's the thing most people get completely wrong about empaths. They assume the disappearance is about anger or coldness. But it's not. It's about reaching a threshold that nobody else could see building. This is where it gets really interesting, because the people who vanish without warning are usually the ones who stayed way too long without saying a word. Comment, I disappeared below if this already hits closer than you expected. In Proverbs 17:28, even a foolish man, when he holds his peace, is counted wise, and he that shutteth his lips is esteemed a man of understanding. My name is Dr. Jordan Peterson, and I spend way too much time thinking about narcissism, emotional intelligence, and human behavior. If you're someone who has ever pulled away completely, cut off contact, gone silent, disappeared, not out of cruelty, but out of sheer emotional exhaustion, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you finally see what's really going on. There's a moment that happens inside an empath that nobody ever talks about, and it doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't announce itself with a breakdown or an argument or a door slamming shut. It happens quietly, privately, often in the middle of a completely ordinary moment. You could be sitting across from someone you love, nodding, listening, holding space like you always do, and something deep inside you just shifts, not loudly, not violently, just a quiet cellular level recognition that you have nothing left, that the well is dry, that you have been pouring so long, so consistently, so silently, that you didn't even notice when you started pouring from an empty vessel. This is what nobody outside of an empath experience ever gets to see. They see the smile, they see the availability, they see the person who always picks up the phone, always shows up, always knows exactly what to say when the world falls apart for someone else. What they don't see is the accumulation, the invisible weight that builds with every unreciprocated conversation. Every emotional crisis absorbed, every time you felt someone else's pain so deeply that you carried it home with you, laid down with it, woke up with it, and still went back the next day ready to take on more. People on the outside only ever see the surface. They never see the storage. And that's the cruelest part of being an empath. The capacity to feel deeply is also the capacity to feel silently. You don't explode the way others might. You don't make a scene. You don't send the long, angry message or pick the fight that might actually release some of the pressure building inside you. Instead, you compress. You internalize. You tell yourself that what you're feeling isn't that serious, that others have it worse, that you should be able to handle this because you always have before. And so the overflow has nowhere to go. It just rises, slowly, invisibly, until one day it doesn't. What makes this even more psychologically complex is that empaths rarely recognize the overflow as it's happening because you are so highly attuned to the emotional states of everyone around you. Your own internal signals get buried under the noise of other people's needs. You become so fluent in reading others that you lose the ability to read yourself. Your nervous system is constantly processing external emotional data. The tension in someone's voice, the sadness beneath someone's joke, the loneliness hiding behind someone's anger. And in the middle of all that processing, your own cup is quietly overflowing onto the floor, and you are too busy mopping up someone else's mess to notice the flood happening at your own feet. This is the invisible overflow, not a single event. Not one person who pushed you over the edge. It is the compounded, unwitnessed, unacknowledged weight of feeling everything for everyone over a sustained period of time with little to no emotional reciprocity. It is what happens when sensitivity is treated as a resource to be consumed rather than a gift to be respected. It is what happens when the most feeling person in every room becomes the emotional landfill for everyone else's unprocessed pain. And when that threshold is finally reached, when the overflow becomes undeniable, the empath doesn't fight, they don't argue their case. They don't explain what's been building for months or years. They simply go quiet, they pull back, they disappear. Not because they stop caring, but because caring that deeply for that long without being seen or refilled eventually costs a person everything they have. And the only way to survive it is to stop completely, without warning. before there is nothing left of them at all. Most people assume that when an empath disappears, it happens. Suddenly, that one day everything was fine and the next day they were gone. But that is almost never the truth. What looks sudden from the outside has almost always been a long, slow, exhausting process happening entirely beneath the surface. A process that began not with a single breaking point, but with 1,000 tiny moments of giving that were never acknowledged, never returned, and never refilled. The disappearance is never the beginning of the story. It is the final chapter of a book that nobody else bothered to read. Depletion in an empath doesn't look the way most people imagine depletion looks. It doesn't look like burnout in the conventional sense. It doesn't look like someone who is visibly struggling or falling apart or asking for help. In fact, it looks like the complete opposite. The most depleted empaths are often the ones who appear the most functional, the ones still showing up, still listening, still being the stable, dependable, emotionally available presence that everyone around them has come to expect and quietly depend on. The depletion is hidden behind competence, masked by consistency, buried beneath a pattern of showing up that has been so established for so long that even the empath themselves doesn't know how to stop it. Because here is what people don't understand about how empaths are wired. Giving is not just something they do. For most empaths, giving is something they were conditioned into from a very early age. Many empaths grew up in environments where their emotional sensitivity made them the unofficial caretaker of the room. The child who sensed when a parent was upset and adjusted their behavior to ease the tension. The teenager who became the therapist for all their friends because they were simply better at holding pain than anyone else around them. By the time they reach adulthood, the pattern is so deeply embedded that nature feels like a choice. It feels like identity, and you cannot set down what you believe you fundamentally are. So the depletion compounds. Every relationship that takes more than it gives, every friendship where the emotional labor is completely one-sided, every conversation that ends with the other person feeling lighter and the empath walk heavier, every time they swallow their own needs to tend to someone else's, every night they lie awake processing emotions that don't even belong to them, it stacks, layer upon invisible layer. And because empaths are extraordinarily good at normalizing their own suffering, they keep redefining their threshold. They keep telling themselves this is just how it is, that this is just what caring feels like. That exhaustion is simply the price of being someone who loves deeply. What makes this depletion particularly devastating is the silence surrounding it. Empaths rarely ask for help, not because they don't need it, but because they are so practiced at being the helper that they genuinely don't know how to occupy the other role. Vulnerability feels foreign. Asking to be held feels like an imposition. And so they carry everything alone while continuing to carry everything for everyone else. Simultaneously, the weight doubles. The reserves drain. And still they show up the next day with a smile that nobody thinks to look behind. By the time an empath reaches the point of disappearing, they have already been running on empty for far longer than anyone around them realized. The disappearance is not impulsive. It is not dramatic. It is the inevitable conclusion of a depletion that was always visible to anyone who was paying attention. The tragedy is that the people closest to empaths are often the least likely to pay attention because the empath made it so effortlessly easy for them not to. When an empathist goes silent, the world around them tends to interpret it as punishment, as coldness, as a passive-aggressive withdrawal designed to make someone feel guilty or confused. People reach out and get nothing back and immediately begin constructing a narrative about what they did wrong, or worse, what the empath is doing to them. The silence gets labeled, it gets pathologized. It gets turned into evidence of emotional immaturity or manipulation or avoidance. And in the middle of all that external noise and interpretation, nobody stops to ask the only question that actually matters. What was the empath protecting themselves from when they went quiet? Because that is the truth that gets buried under everyone else's reaction to the disappearance. The silence was never about anyone else. It was never a strategy. It was never calculated or intentional in the way people assume. It was survival, raw, instinctive, non-negotiable survival, the kind that bypasses logic and explanation, because when a human being has been operating beyond their emotional capacity for long enough, the nervous system stops asking for permission and simply acts. The silence is not a choice in the way most choices are made. It is the body and the mind and the soul finally, collectively, refusing to continue on a path that was quietly destroying them. Empaths experience the world at a frequency that most people never have to navigate. Every interaction carries emotional weight. Every conversation is processed, not just intellectually, but physically, energetically, spiritually. When someone is in pain near an empath, the empath doesn't just observe that pain, they absorb it. When there is tension in a room, the empath doesn't just notice it, they carry it. When someone they love is struggling, the empath doesn't just offer support, they merge with the struggle, take it on as their own and work through it internally as though it happened to them directly. This is not metaphor. This is the neurological and psychological reality of how deeply sensitive people move through the world. And it means that every single day costs an empath more than it costs the average person. Every single interaction is a withdrawal from a reserve that is rarely, if ever, replenished. So when the silence finally comes, understand what it is actually saying. It is saying that the cost became too high. It is saying that continued engagement in that form, with that person, within that dynamic, would have meant the complete erosion of self. It is saying that somewhere beneath all the giving and absorbing and caring and showing up, there was still a self worth preserving. And that self made a decision, not loudly, not with a manifesto or a confrontation or a carefully worded explanation, just quietly, firmly. Finally, there is something profound and deeply misunderstood about the way empaths protect themselves, because they spend so much of their lives protecting others. People forget that they are also human beings with limits. People forget that the person who always held space for everyone else also needs space. That the person who always absorbed the emotional overflow of the room is also capable of overflow. That the person who made everyone else feel safe was perhaps never once made to feel safe themselves. The silence is the moment the empathant chooses themselves, possibly for the first time in a very long time, possibly for the first time ever, and it is not abandonment. It is not cruelty. It is not something that should be chased down and argued with or guilted into reversing. It is the sound of someone who spent years being everything to everyone, finally becoming something essential to themselves. It is the most honest thing an empath will ever do, not because it is easy, but B, because after everything they absorbed, everything they carried, everything they silently survived, choosing their own peace over someone else's comfort is not weakness. It is the hardest and most necessary act of self-preservation a deeply feeling person can ever perform. If you think the hardest part of being an empath is the disappearing, you are only seeing half the story. The disappearing, as painful and disorienting as it is, carries with it a certain relief, a stillness, a silence that finally belongs to the empath, rather than being imposed on them by the noise of everyone else's emotional world. The hardest part is not the leaving. The hardest part is everything that comes after. The internal war that begins the moment the door closes and the empath is finally alone with themselves. Because disappearing does not silence the inner voice. It amplifies it. And that voice, shaped by years of conditioning and care and self-abandonment, does not simply celebrate the escape. It begins immediately to question it. This is the return dilemma. And it is one of the most psychologically complex experiences an empath can face. Because on one side of the dilemma is the very real need for distance, for silence, for the kind of deep restoration that can only happen when you are no longer responsible for managing the emotional atmosphere of every room you enter. The empath knows this need is legitimate. They can feel it in their body, in their exhaustion, in the way the silence feels like oxygen after a long time underwater. The need to stay away is not imagined. It is not dramatic. It is physiological and psychological and completely valid. But on the other side of that dilemma is something that empaths carry with a weight that most people will never fully understand. Empaths carry with a weight that most people will never fully understand. Guilt, not the surface level guilt of having done something wrong, but a deep structural guilt that was built into them long before they had the language to name it. The guilt of an empath who disappears is not logical. It does not respond to reason. You can remind yourself 100 times that you needed to leave, that you were drowning, that staying would have destroyed you completely. And the guilt will nod, acknowledge all of that, and then quietly ask you anyway whether the people you left are okay, whether they are hurting, whether your absence is causing pain that you could prevent simply by returning. And because empaths feel other people's pain as though it is their own, the imagined pain of those they left behind becomes almost indistinguishable from real pain. It pulls constantly, mercilessly. This is where the dilemma deepens into something truly cruel, because the empath now finds themselves in an impossible position. Returning means re-entering the dynamic that depleted them in the first place. It means resuming the role of absorber, caretaker, emotional anchor. It means the silence they finally claimed for themselves gets filled again with everyone else's noise before they have had nearly enough time to recover. Returning too soon is not a reunion, it is a relapse. And some part of the empath knows this with absolute clarity. They know that going back before they are genuinely restored will only accelerate the next disappearance, that the cycle will repeat, that nothing will have fundamentally changed except the empath's reserves, which will be lower this time than they were before. And yet, not returning carries its own unbearable weight, because empaths are not cold people who can easily detach and move forward without looking back. They are deeply relational. Connection is not a luxury for them. It is a core need. The same sensitivity that made them absorb so much from others also means they genuinely miss people. They grieve the relationships they step be. Act from they replay conversations and moments and feel the warmth of what once existed alongside the pain of what it cost them. They do not disappear because they stopped loving. They disappear because they loved so much and so deeply and so asymmetrically that it became a form of slow self-destruction. So the return dilemma is really a question that cuts to the very core of an empath's identity. Can I go back as a different version of myself? Can I return without resuming the same patterns? Can I re-enter that relationship or that space with new boundaries, new limits, a new understanding of what I will and will not absorb? And the honest answer is that this is only possible if something on the other side has also changed. If the people they return to have developed even a fraction of the awareness needed to receive an empath differently, to see them as a full human being rather than an emotional resource, to give as genuinely and as consistently as they have always taken. Because an empathist can do all the internal work in the world. They can heal in the silence. They can rebuild their reserves. They can develop boundaries that did not exist before. But if they return to the exact same environment, the exact same dynamic, the exact same people who never once noticed the overflow building or the depletion deepening, then the silence was only ever a pause, not a transformation. And empaths, at their most self-aware, understand this distinction with a clarity that is equal parts wisdom and heartbreak. The return is only worth the risk when what they are returning to has become, in some meaningful way, worthy of everything they bring.
And that was Jordan Peterson. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you're not neutral and that the government has no rights.